This is a GRDC podcast.
Growers in Western Australia are well aware of the benefits of growing legumes in their rotation, but often have concerns about their reliability and can lack confidence in their production. A GRDC investment with the Grower Group Alliance is aiming to change that, and in a 4-part series, we'll be tackling the agronomy, profitability, marketing and harvesting of growing legumes in WA. Hi, I'm Shannon Beattie, and in this episode, we're going to tackle the first part of that equation, how to grow them. To do so, I'm joined by agVivo agronomist and Moora grower Erin Cahill to chat about how he personally grows lentils and lupins, plus some agronomic advice for growing other key legumes. So Erin, grower and agronomist, tell me how that works and how you balance it.
It depends on the day of the year or the time of the week, but through seeding harvest period, full-time farmer, and then through the pre-season, February, March, April, full-time agronomist, and in the growing season, full-time agronomist. So it balances fairly well.
Do you have a bit of pressure on you to have some really nice looking crops, being an agronomist and a grower?
Oh, I do. I get critiqued probably a bit heavier than everyone else, and I guess I'm offering advice year round, so I probably get a little bit fed back my way too, but it's good.
Let's start off with you as a grower when it comes to legumes. Talk to me about what you grow here on the farm.
Our farm's sort of split in two parts. We've got some country back to the east, which is heavier, and we predominantly run a lot of wheat, barley and canola. Whereas out on the sand plain, which is the bulk of our operation now, we tend to run a 4-year rotation, which is lupins/lentils now, followed by wheat, then canola, then barley.
Let's start with the lupins. When did you start growing those and what was the motivation behind it?
We probably started growing lupins out here back probably after 2010, 2011, somewhere around there. And we started ameliorating, spading 2011. So prior to that, lupins, well, a lot of crops out on this sand plain that were really struggling with non-wetting soils. So once we spaded and we could get a good establishment again, then we brought the legumes back in and they become quite profitable.
And then you recently started growing lentils as well. When did you make that call and why was the decision made to flick over to lentils as well?
Probably started looking at lentils in 2019 and had got some mates at Esperance, went down, saw what they were doing. Probably took a while to make my mind up, and that was probably the varieties at the time. Now with the IMI-tolerant varieties, that sort of opened the gate for us up here, and had our first dip in the water last year in 2024. And they went quite well. So grew lentils and lupins alongside each other in the same paddock, and yeah, good result in probably a fairly tough year. So yeah, I think they've got a future.
Talk to me about soil types. You mentioned that you're growing them on some lighter soils, which they're not necessarily, that's not down as the key soil that you should be growing lentils or lupins in. So how have you gone about making them successful on those soils?
Traditionally, they've been back on the more medium to heavy country. And if you look at the rest of Australia, South Australia, Victoria, it's predominantly on the medium to heavy country. But the South Australians had pushed them more into the lighter sort of non-traditional lentil country, and that's I started looking at that and some of the varieties that were performing in those soil types, and that's what we brought over here. So the paddock behind us where we grew them last year is a mix of gravels, which we plosser ploughed, and sand, which we spaded, and all our soil types have been heavily limed, so the pHs are good, which is a real key with lentils, is having good soil pH. So once we'd achieved all of that, then we thought, well, why not have a go? So
Give them a crack and see what happens.
Yep.
You have a direct comparison of lentils and lupins, one paddock, same season. How did that go in 2024?
They both went well. The lupins in that particular paddock, the lupins did 2.47 and the lentils did 1.5. So the lupins out-yielded the lentils, but the profitability of the lentils was well in front of the lupins. The mix of soil types on the gravels and the better sandy duplexes, the better quality sands, the lentils were really, really good. When you got to the really poor sand, lupins were still king. So I think the way we'll probably manage it going forward is our better paddocks out here will grow lentils, or we might split up a paddock and have blocks. So the weaker soil types in the paddock, I'll happily just grow lupins, and then the better classes of soils, which we can still achieve, luckily on this farm, quite easily with the way the soil types sort of feature in the landscape. We should be able to split paddocks up quite easily.
Talk to me about the other agronomic benefits that led to you wanting to bring lentils into the rotation. You mentioned that there's varieties now that have sort of some IMI-tolerant
Yep.
herbicides. So talk to me about that.
Probably some of the restrictions in lentils in terms of people adopting them have been broadleaf control. So radish, capeweed, they're difficult weeds or can be difficult weeds to control. But with the influence now with the breeders and some new varieties coming out that are IMI tolerant, both from the point of being able to use IMI in season to control weeds, but also where we're growing the barley that we grow in our rotation is IMI barley, so they'll tolerate the IMI carry through from the previous season. So that trait becoming available was a game changer in terms of bringing them into the system for us.
And I believe the new varieties of lentils also have a bit of extra disease resistance potentially that some previous varieties didn't quite have.
Yeah, so the newer varieties are much better for acicida, much better for Botrytis grey mold. You still need to use fungicides, but probably the knock on lentils and chickpeas and that going back was that you had to spray really, really regularly. So there was two things. The disease resistance of the varieties wasn't great, but also the fungicides available weren't great. Whereas now we've got a lot of really good fungicides that have really good residual value. So you're not having to be in there spraying every 2 weeks, which when you're trying to manage the rest of your farm, if you had to focus on your legume, every couple of weeks during the key parts of the growing season, it was too much.
How do you see lentils and lupins fitting into your operation moving forward? Are you planning to increase the amount of hectares seeded to them as the years go on, or is it a bit of trial and error still?
Well, I think we've reached a point now out, I guess, on these soil types out here, we'll run a quarter of each, so a 4-year rotation, and that seems to be working very well. We've had a rotation trial across the road with CSBP looking at the rotational benefits of legumes it's been running for 5 years now, and what's showing out is the benefit of canola or cereal off the back of a legume break. So as much as you can sit and do all the economics on paper and make it come up that continuous wheat or continuous barley looks good, the reality is we've found that having a legume every 4th or 5th year is going to be the way our system works.
I'm assuming that's because of the nitrogen fixation benefits of having a lentil or a lupin crop in.
Yeah, that's part of it. So the nitrogen fixation, definitely part of it. You can't beat legume nitrogen. It's disease breaks from all facets of the rotation, root disease, leaf disease, and also different chemistry. So different herbicides, so we can keep rotating herbicides within our rotation. So it's a bit of everything. It's not just nitrogen, and we're definitely seeing the benefit. Where we go with lentils v lupins, we've been 100% lupins. I can probably see us swinging now to maybe a 50-50 mix of lentils and lupins, depending on the paddock.
Let's talk about your agronomy work a little bit more and talk about some of the other grain legumes that exist. Do you have many clients that are growing legumes other than lentils and lupins?
Not anymore. So probably back in the early 2000s, there was a few guys growing chickpeas. I've probably only got a limited part of my area that would suit chickpeas, although, again, like lentils, now that we've concentrated on fixing soil and looked at it and there's newer varieties, there's probably a lot more country that will grow chickpeas. Used to have a few guys growing field peas. They've sort of given them up, but there's probably a little bit of interest to go back into field peas. Beans have never really been a big crop up in this Moora area. There's a few people tried, but they certainly haven't had the results that down south has had. So I think for our area, it'll probably be still primarily lupins, but maybe a mix of lentils and field peas. I think they'll be the two.
You mentioned peas and chickpeas as two peas, but field peas and chickpeas as two that people have dabbled in the area.
Yep.
What sort of soil types do they tend to lean towards?
They've traditionally been the medium to heavy country, so the heavier clays. So you're probably back around the flats at Moora, over to around Wongan Hills, and then up around Dalwallinu, Killarney. They've been the traditional chickpea type soil types. And then as you broke off those heavier soil types into the light to medium country, that's been where your lupins have come into the mix. There's still a lot of guys that do not grow a legume at all, and that may remain, but I think there's definitely a keen interest from a lot of guys to try and get a legume back into the system.
What would you say to those people with your agronomist hat on who aren't growing legumes at all and have similar country to you and maybe have some of the same concerns that you first had that stopped you from maybe getting into a lentil for 3 or 4 years? What would you say to them now?
Try a little bit. I mean, the challenge to all these things is you do a little bit. It's a bit like when we started spading, we did a bit, it worked, and then we could see the benefit. So we did a lot more and a lot more. And farming's one of those things where you learn. I mean, there's a lot of research done, but a lot of the good growers are leading the charge, and sometimes the research comes in behind it. And the thing with lentils, there's a lot of good growers in Esperance, the Esperance Port Zone. Those guys have been doing it for a long time. They've helped, obviously, on different soil types. But if we can learn off other growers, and probably one of the things that's really stopped some of the alternate legumes from being adopted strongly is the harvestability. And that's still a challenge. The varieties are getting better and easier to harvest, but you're close to the ground, so you need to make peace with that. But the header fronts now are a lot better for harvesting those type crops than what they were 5 or 10 years ago too.
Anything else that you want to add, Erin, when it comes to growing legumes or growing, I should say, lentils and lupins on the farm here?
No, lupins, most growers in WA that have grown lupins, it's a pretty robust package now, and most guys are pretty good at them. Lentils, we're still probably, in our area, we're still probably trying to work it out a little bit. One of the key things that we found last year was rolling them. We made sure that we rolled them post-emergence, and that definitely made harvesting a lot easier. So that pushed in all the little sticks and rocks because you are literally right on the ground when you're harvesting them. So I think that's a key step. I had a couple of guys that I do with my agronomy that chose not to do that, and their feedback at the end of the season was that they would never not roll a lentil crop ever again. So rolling them, paddock selection, I think, is the key. They're not going to fit in every paddock because you are close to the ground. Undulating, broken country will be difficult, but most farms have got some country where they'll grow. So
The right soil type on a nice flat paddock and give it a crack.
Yep. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today, Erin. I appreciate your time.
No worries.
Today, I've been chatting with grower and agronomist Erin Cahill about the agronomy of growing lentils and lupins in the Moora area of WA. More information on this topic can be found in the description box of this podcast or online at grdc.com.au. Got an idea for a GRDC podcast? Hit us up on socials and send us a DM. I'm Shannon Beattie, and this has been a GRDC podcast. Thanks for listening.